The dining table was filled with happy voices and laughter as both families ate dinner together. You were sitting opposite to your sister's brother-in-law who was flirting with you secretly, making sure no one noticed. You just kept rolling your eyes and avoiding him, but not completely. Your dad cleared his throat, making everyone turn to him. "We have been thinking about something for a while," he said, putting down his fork. You sat up straight, feeling nervous. That voice of his always meant big decisions. Once you didn't get to choose. Your mom smiled and joined in. "Since Ryan is starting college soon and Jungkook's apartment is close to her school, we thought it would be a great idea for her to stay with him." You blinked in surprise. "Wait, stay with Jungkook?" "Yes, his place is safer than a dorm, and he can look after you," Jungkook's mom said happily. "And now that we are a family, we know he'll take care of you." "Of course I will," Jungkook said, sitting up straighter and looking very serious. "Ryan's safety is my responsibility." You almost choked on your water. Safety, responsibility. Was this the same Jungkook who always teased and flirted with you? "That's very nice of you, Jungkook," your mom said, smiling at him. Jungkook gave a small shrug, acting like it wasn't a big deal. "Ryan needs to focus on her studies and I'll make sure she has everything she needs." You couldn't believe how convincing he sounded. He made himself look like the perfect responsible figure when in reality he was nothing like that. "Jungkook is so grown up now, Ryan. You are lucky to have him," your dad said proudly. Jungkook turned to you, his eyes sparkling with a bit of mischief. "Don't worry, Ryan. You'll be in good hands," he said with a soft smile. He forced a smile, feeling like he was enjoying this way too much. "I'll even help her study if she needs it," Jungkook added, his voice full of confidence. "That's so thoughtful of you guys, but I can manage in a dorm." You stammered, desperate for a way out. Staying with Jungkook meant constant torment. He never missed a chance to make you squirm with his flirtatious remarks. "Nonsense," Jungkook's mom said. "The dorms are cramped and uncomfortable. This is the best solution." You felt cornered, your protest dying in your throat as the decision was finalized without your input. Jungkook raised his glass in a mock toast, giving you a wink when no one was looking. You sighed and stabbed your fork in your steak. The next week felt like the start of something you weren't ready for. With your bags packed and your heart pounding, you stood outside Jungkook's apartment door. You could hear faint music from inside, and it only made you more nervous. "This is it, the beginning of my nightmare." You reached out to knock, but before you could knock, the door swung open, and there he was, Jungkook. His hair was messy, and he wore a loose t-shirt with sweatpants, looking like he had just rolled out of bed, yet he still managed to look annoyingly good. "Ah, my new roommate has arrived," he said with a smirk, leaning against the door frame. You rolled your eyes, dragging your suitcase past him. "Don't call me that. I'm only here because our parents insisted." Jungkook grabbed the handle of your suitcase effortlessly, pulling it inside. "Relax, Ryan. I don't bite unless you want me to." Cross. He shot back, walking past him and into the living room. His apartment was surprisingly clean, minimalistic, and modern, with a cozy vibe. It smelled like coffee and vanilla, and you could see he had put some effort into tidying up. "Nice, right?" he asked, noticing your gaze. "I even cleaned the place for you. You should be honored." You crossed your arms, unimpressed. "Wow, so generous. Where's my room?" "Follow me." He led you down a short hallway and opened a door. The room was small but nice, with a bed, a desk, and a big window that let in lots of light. "Here it is, your palace," he said dramatically, tossing your suitcase onto the bed. You sighed, already feeling overwhelmed. Thanks, can you leave now? But of course, Jungkook didn't move. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe again, his arms crossed and that signature smirk on his face. You know it's going to be fun having you here, like our own little adventure. Adventure? You asked, narrowing your eyes. Yeah, he said, tilting his head. I'll get to watch you struggle with your classes, complain about life, and maybe even blush when I tease you. He groaned, throwing a pillow at him. Out. He dodged it easily, laughing as he walked out. All right, but don't miss me too much. As the door closed behind him, you flopped onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. This was going to be harder than you thought. God, give me some patience to deal with this guy. You kept staring at the ceiling, but then a smile appeared on your face. Living with Jungkook, the guy who couldn't go 5 minutes without teasing you, was bound to drive you crazy, but as much as you hated to admit it, there was a tiny part of you that felt excited. Life really is about to change, and with Jungkook around, it wouldn't be boring, that was for sure. It had only been a day since you moved into Jungkook's apartment, but it already felt like you were living in a completely different world. Your belongings were neatly tucked into the spare room he had offered you, and everything seemed peaceful until you stepped out of your room that morning. Rubbing the sleep from your eyes, you walked into the living room only to freeze in your tracks. Jungkook was standing in the middle of the room, completely shirtless, with a towel slung around his neck. His toned abs glistened with drops of water, and his damp hair stuck to his forehead, clearly fresh from a shower. Morning, he said casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Your brain short circuited. Why aren't you wearing a shirt? You blurted out, immediately regretting it. He smirked, clearly enjoying a flustered reaction. It's my house, do I need a reason? Basic human decency. You shot back, averting your eyes and trying to focus on literally anything else, the wall, the floor, the plant in the corner, anything but him. Oh, come on, he teased, walking closer to you. Don't tell me you're shy. We are practically family, right? You rolled your eyes, your cheeks burning. That doesn't mean I want to see this thing first in the morning. This? He asked, faking innocence as he gestured towards his torso. What's wrong with this? You groaned, covering your face with your hands. Can you please just put a shirt on? He laughed, a deep, rich sound that only made you more irritated and unfortunately a little more flustered. Fine, I'll spare you this time, he said, throwing on a random hoodie. But you'll have to get used to it eventually. I'm not going to change just because you are here. Great, you muttered under your breath, stalking off to the kitchen. This is going to be a nightmare. The first few days were a roller coaster. Jungkook had somehow mastered the art of being the most annoying person on the planet, from stealing your snacks to walking around shirtless as if it was normal. He made sure you never got too comfortable. Do you really have to do that here? You asked as he sprawled out on the couch, flipping through the channels. What, exist? He shot back, grinning. No, lounge around like you own the place. He raised an eyebrow. Wyan, I do own the place. You rolled your eyes and stormed back to your room, determined to focus on your studies, but even in the quiet of your little corner, Jungkook had a way of creeping into your thoughts. His teasing, his smirks, and that stupidly charming laugh, it was maddening. Over time, however, you started noticing little things about him, like how he always made sure you had breakfast before leaving for class, even if it was just a banana and a note that said, Don't fail your test, baby girl. Or how he never let you carry anything heavy, no matter how much you argued. Seriously, Jungkook, I can manage my own groceries. You huffed one morning as he grabbed all the bags from your hands. Not while I'm around, he said simply, carrying them into the kitchen like it was no big deal. It was confusing. How could someone be so infuriating, also be sweet? The rain was falling hard, soaking you as you walked home from class. By the time you reached Jungkook's apartment, your clothes were wet and stuck to your skin, and your hair was all messy from the rain. Jungkook was in the kitchen, and when he heard the door open, he looked up. He saw you standing there, dripping wet, and a small smile appeared on his face. Wow, you look like a drowned rat. You frowned and tried to squeeze the water out of your sleeves. Nice to know my misery makes you laugh. Always, he said, smiling playfully, but then he stopped and his face softened. He walked over to the counter, picked up a towel, and sighed. Before you could say anything, he tossed the towel over your head. Dry yourself off before you make a mess everywhere, and go take a hot shower so you don't catch a cold. You stood still, staring at him. He was so close now, and you could feel his warmth. His voice was still teasing, but there was something caring in it that made you feel strange. You don't need to pretend all caring. Jungkook's smirk faded slightly, and he took a slow step forward, closing the distance between you. Your heart raced as he moved closer, his presence overwhelming. His breath brushed against your ear as he leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, almost husky tone. Who said I was pretending? Your breath hitched, and for a moment it felt like the world had slowed down. His proximity made it hard to think, to breathe. You could feel the heat radiating from his body, the tension building between you two like a thick, unspoken promise. He straightened up, his gaze locking onto yours, and the teasing smile returned, though there was something more behind that. Didn't know I had that effect on you, Ryan. You look like you're about to run away from me. What's wrong? You're scared? The teasing tone was there, but there was a certain intensity in his gaze, something that made you feel like as if he was daring you to say something, anything. Before you could find the right words or make sense of what you were feeling, you quickly turned away and walked briskly towards your room. Your heart was pounding in your chest and your mind was racing with thoughts you couldn't quite understand what was happening to you. As you reached your door, you stopped for a moment, your back against it, taking a deep breath. Your body felt on edge, like it was drawn to him in ways you hadn't expected. You wanted to stay far away, but at the same time, it felt like something was pulling you closer to him, something you couldn't fight. You closed your eyes trying to push the thoughts away, but all you could think of was how much you felt his presence, how his closeness made you feel things you didn't know you wanted. After you finished showering, you returned to the living room wrapped in a towel, your hair still damp. The apartment was warm, the faint smell of food wafting through the air. Jungkook was already at the dining table setting out two bowls of ramen. He looked up at you with a grin that was familiar, but today it felt like there was an extra layer to it, something deeper, more charged. About time you showed up. He teased, but there was a softness in his voice now, something almost intimate. You sat down across from him, trying to ignore the way your heart was pounding in your chest. The silence between you felt thick, there was a tension in the air. Jungkook's eyes flicked to you again, and this time there was no hiding the way his gaze lingered on your bare shoulders. The towel still wrapped around you. He leaned back in his chair, his smirk widened. You have been awfully quiet tonight, Ryan. What's wrong? Not feeling the food? Or maybe it's something else? His voice was teasing light, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper in his tone. You tried to shrug it off, focusing your attention on your plate, but you couldn't escape the feeling that his eyes were still locked on you. He made it so hard to pretend you didn't feel it. The heat between you two was undeniable, and the way your body responded was out of your control. You shifted in your seat, hoping he would drop the subject, but Jungkook wasn't going to let it go so easily. He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving yours. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper, only for you to hear. Come on, Ryan, don't pretend you are not avoiding me. It's kind of cute, how hard you are trying not to look at me. His words were playful, but there was something in the way he said them that made your breath hitched. You couldn't hold his gaze anymore. It was too much. The air was thick with tension, and you tried to brush it off as casually as you could, but your voice was small when you spoke. I'm not avoiding you. You muttered, though you knew it was a lie. It was impossible to ignore the way your body reacted to his presence, to the way he seemed to have this effect on you. Your heart raced every time he was near, and you hated that you couldn't control it. Jungkook didn't believe you. He leaned even closer, the intensity of his eyes matching the weight of his words. I know you better than that, Fayan. I can see it in your eyes. You're trying to act like you're unaffected, but it's kind of obvious. You don't have to pretend with me. His voice softened as he leaned in just a little further, close enough now that you could feel his breath against your skin. The words he spoke weren't just teasing anymore, they were a challenge you didn't know how to fight. I. The words caught in your throat. There was no point in denying it anymore. He knew you couldn't keep hiding what you were feeling, not when he was looking at you like that, like he already had you figured out. What's wrong? You look like you're about to run. You finally looked at him. Maybe I should run. You were afraid of the mess inside your mind, the way your body wanted him but mind telling you to think. You are cute when you're confused. You know that? Jungkook murmured, his face just inches from yours. The smell of his cologne mixed with the faint scent of soap, a reminder of how close he was. You bit your lip trying not to get lost in the feeling. But it was hard. His eyes, dark and inviting, seemed to hold you captive. Every inch of you screamed to run away, but another part of you wanted to stay, wanted to give in. You didn't know how much longer you could fight it. I don't know what you want me to say, Jungkook. You whispered, your voice trembling slightly. I want you to stop pretending like you don't feel it too. You could feel his breath against your skin, and the world around you felt too small, too tight. The tension was thick, and for a moment neither of you moved. It felt like time itself had stopped, leaving you suspended in a world where nothing mattered except the two of you and the undeniable pull that neither of you seemed able to ignore. Before you could finish, Jungkook closed the gap between you two, and in an instant his lips were on yours. It was sudden but not unwelcome. His lips were soft yet demanding, and the kiss stole the breath right out of you. There was no hesitation from either of you. No more games, just raw, undeniable chemistry.